Hey, Kids Cook Real Food audience. Katie Kimball here for the Healthy Parenting Connector. And I honestly can't believe that it has taken me this long to interview Dr. Aimie Apigian, who is a dear friend, an amazing, wise person, and just like the information and wisdom that flows from her is incredible. So I cannot wait to introduce you to her. Dr. Aimie, thank you for being here.
Anytime, Katie, anytime.
Well, I approached Dr. Aimie because I wanted more content on the highly sensitive child. We've talked with a few other experts about highly sensitive people, highly sensitive children, but I know, especially with working with picky eaters, kids with food allergies, this idea of like, my kid is sensitive, my kid has sensory issues or is emotionally sensitive is a really big deal. And it just feels like an added pressure for parents. We really want to understand what's going on. And no one in the world is better at understanding what's going on in both body and mind at the same time than Dr. Aimie Apigian. So we are going to tap into that wisdom. First, let me read the official bio so you know to whom we're speaking and you know why she's an expert. She has lots of letters after her name. She is the leading medical expert on how life experiences get stored in the body and restoring the body to its best state of health through her signature model and methodology, the biology of trauma. Now, here come the letters after her name. Ready? Double board certified medical physician in preventative medicine and addiction medicine, certified functional medicine physician, and trainings and certifications in neuroautoimmunity, nutrition, genetics for addictions, mental health, and mood and behavioral disorders. Can you see the mind and the body? Like, oh my goodness, so much training. Are you addicted to learning by any chance?
Perhaps.
I think I've got you pegged.
You might have me pegged. I love to learn.
And you know what? Me too, but I just do it without all these letters. I don't get those certifications. Dr. Aimie also is certified in the trauma response model, somatic experiencing, which is the body, and neuroaffective touch. Now, it's not all about sitting in the classroom for Dr. Aimie because her personal life experiences really led her into this idea of trauma therapy training, first for her adopted son and then for herself. And she's got a really unique lens for understanding trauma out of that because she joins the worlds of neuroscience, right, in the brain, and trauma therapy, and the MD part with the body. That's 3 worlds. I just added that. She's the founder and CEO of Trauma Healing Accelerated, and her foundational online course, The 21-Day Journey to Calm Aliveness, is what I did in January of 2023, but we're recording this like literally 1 business day before we start. So I don't know what it's going to be like yet, but I have heard from a dear friend that it's the best course she's ever taken. I am going to find time to make it work, and it's going to change my life. That's what I expect. So, Dr. Aimie Apigian, the longest bio I've ever read. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Katie. Yeah, like I love the work that you do. I think that your work is so important with families, but empowering kids, because it certainly, as I see through the lens of trauma, and trauma disempowers people, the more that we can empower our kids early on in life with skills and knowledge, the better we actually protect them from trauma and build their resilience. So I love the work that you do. Thank you for what you do.
Well, goodness gracious, thank you. Because a lot of your work in trauma, it dials back to people's childhoods, right? So it really is all about the kids, whether we're talking about adults or kids. So what's your story, Aimie? How did you go from being an average run-of-the-mill MD? Well, you probably were never average. An MD to becoming a biology of trauma somatic experience expert?
Not what I predicted either. Like I'm still kind of shocked at like, this is my path. This is my journey in life, because I actually started out in general surgery. So after medical school, which was when I adopted my son, was during medical school. And then I went on to a general surgery residency. And it was during that time that my body broke. And I had all of the symptoms, the health conditions that I had studied about and knew were closely associated with what are called adverse childhood experiences, what other people would maybe call childhood trauma. But Katie, like, that was not my perspective of my childhood. And it did not make any sense to me why this was my body with chronic fatigue and overweight and autoimmunity and inflammation and depression and anxiety. Why was this my body when I did not relate to having had any kind of a traumatic childhood? If this had been my son, I totally would have understood it. And I would have written it off as just being like, well, of course, what do you expect? There's nothing you can do about it. But because that wasn't my story, then it made me get curious and lean in and figure out, wait a second, I'm missing a piece of this puzzle here. There's something here that I don't understand about this picture of how adverse childhood experiences, stress in early life becomes your diseases as an adult. And first of all, I want to learn this, but I also need my life back. So it became not just intellectual information, but even just like when I was working with my son, for me, it became, and I need to find those things that will work. Don't send me to something that sounds nice, but doesn't really work. Like, I'm not into placebo effects. Like, I need my life back. I need to be able to get out of bed. I need to be able to get back on my bike. I need to be able to work. And so I was looking specifically for what is wrong, what happened, why is this my body, and what can I do about it as an adult? Thankfully, I had that experience with my son, so I had at least a starting place to know elements of trauma and attachment trauma. And so it helped me at least get started with things. And then with time, as I started to apply the tools to myself now, things started to unfold and I learned so much more, which ultimately led me to becoming an addiction medicine physician, really working with the survival system of a body, of a human body, of a system when we're working with an addiction medicine process.
Wow. Am I correct in assuming that conventional medicine did not serve you when your body broke, and that's where you sort of were pulled into the functional world?
That is exactly when it happened. So I remember, even now, I remember sitting in the rheumatologist office. And by this time, I had had all of my lab results. My vitamin D was very low. And despite the traditional supplementation of 50,000 units once a week, it wasn't budging. And my ferritin was very low. And there are telltale labs that I have now been able to identify as like, these are signs that your body has a trauma burden. And now that I know this, looking back, is like, yeah, vitamin D is one of those. Ferritin is another one of those. And my ferritin, very low. So ferritin is the storage of your iron. My iron levels were actually fine. I was not anemic, but the storage levels were very low. And despite supplementation, they weren't coming up. And that made no sense to me as a doctor, because I knew, right? Like, oh, you have low labs. I know what to do with that. Let me write you a prescription. Wait a second, this isn't working. And because it was my body, then I was able to, again, get curious about that and be able to lean into, all right, what's going on that my body is not able to absorb these nutrients? And when I went in, because I was, my autoimmune markers were very high. So they sent me to the rheumatologist. And what he said was, Aimie, your markers are high and we have really no clear reason for that, but there's nothing to do about it now. And so, if on any given day you wake up and you have the muscle joint swelling and inflammation, well then, or the butterfly rash of lupus, then come back, we'll diagnose you with lupus and we can talk about, treatments at that point. And I remember asking, like, but what can I do to not get that joint swelling, to not get that joint inflammation? Because I've seen people with these autoimmune conditions and I don't want that to be me. So how can I get off this path? And he said, there's nothing you can do. And I was like, let me prove you wrong.
I know. I am feeling myself like dig in my heels for you. Like my heart just started beating and I wanted to be like, I reject what you're saying, doctor. Like that's not okay.
But I didn't know anything else at that time. Like you said, I was not familiar with functional medicine. And that was what prompted my own research then. And that's how I came across functional medicine. And within the next year, I was at their certification training programs and started my functional medicine training for myself, to help
Uh-huh.
myself. It never was at that point to do anything with my career. I was still thinking that I would still be a general surgeon.
Mm. And
So
now your
this
career is totally transformed.
totally transformed. So this whole thing really has been what has been the calling on my life. And now that I've been able to have the knowledge and the tools to apply to myself, I've been able to actually step into my calling, and was never able to do that before.
The healthier you are, the more you can give. And so many people out there have needs like you had. So I like to start with definitions. I mentioned already a highly sensitive child. I'd love you to define that for us. Who in the world are we even talking about? And also that idea of biology of trauma. You've kind of been dancing around it in your story, but let's like Webster's dictionary it up.
Okay. So in all of my years, when I think of a sensitive person,
Mhm.
the most sensitive people I have ever met, Katie, are those people who have become addicted to something. Those are the most sensitive people I have ever met.
Can I ask if that's the cause or effect? Like, is the substance
Exactly.
addiction causes it, or the,
No, it's usually the other way around.
mm,
A sensitive person is a person who feels more than others.
yeah.
They feel pain more. They feel energy more. They feel fear and anxiety more than others. And so, yes, they have reactions that other people don't understand, because other people are like, you are overreacting.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you don't understand what it feels like in my body. I am not overreacting based on the experience that my body is having right now. And
And
there's
that's
this
a
big
reaction.
discrepancy. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's like an emotional reaction. Does this include like
No,
kids
it's
who are
not just
sensitive to the
emotional reaction.
tags? Okay. You're
Like,
right.
this is
I missed.
everything, right? If we want to talk about the closed tags, well, then they are going to feel that more.
Right.
They're going to feel irritated by those tags more. They're going to have a bigger reaction in their body to chemicals, to foods, to any of these physical things as well, because their body literally feels it deeper than other people.
So the feelings in the body, it can come from, shall we say, inside or out.
Right. It doesn't matter.
Sensitivity.
Yeah. It doesn't matter where it's coming from. When it reaches those senses of the body, it's more sensitive.
These
We
kids
need
are
to
more
think of
likely to, sorry, probably more likely to have food allergies, more likely to have
totally,
the sensory
totally.
processing, obviously, picky eaters.
Oh my goodness, yes. And when we look at it through that lens of you're feeling everything more, yeah, they may become very picky. They may throw that temper tantrum when they're asked to put on that specific shirt or put on those shoes or whatever it is, because like they are so afraid of that experience that they know is coming, that is so uncomfortable for them. Sounds, they can be more sensitive to sounds, meaning the sounds actually jar them more than other people. And
That's me.
so yeah, it's a fascinating thing when we look at it through the perspective of the experience of the body. And I think for many people, you know, again, part of the traditional medical model is that the mind is disconnected from the body. And so we think that we should be able to have logical control over our reactions. And that's not how our biology operates. Our biology is always helping us survive life. And it does that by reacting and what may look like overreacting to other people in certain situations to keep things as manageable as possible. And so for those people who are more sensitive, they do have a greater risk of becoming addicted to something that just numbs all of that down. Like it just tones it down. That jarring noise, that pain from the inflammation in your gut, that light that's coming in through your eyes, whatever it is, all of that, the body sensations that you're experiencing, it just tones everything down and makes everything just more tolerable. Who wouldn't want that? And
Right.
so here they find
So
instant relief with something that they've never been able to find that instant of relief with something else. Everything else has required hard work to get relief. And here all of a sudden they came across something that boom, like it's just gone. And they can actually experience more energy as a result of that sensitivity being numbed, and they become addicted to things. And then of course that's a very hard path to get off once a sensitive person becomes dependent and addicted to something, because as they then get to the point where they want to get off something, their system is actually even more sensitive than what it was before they became dependent on whatever that is.
Oh man. So this is a big risk.
It's a big
you know?
issue.
Then I feel like my heart is already going out to parents of highly sensitive kids, myself included, because you've now said, okay, your kid has a greater risk of being like a wicked addict, and I'm nervous and my body is reacting. So can you just give us one benefit of being highly sensitive real quick, just to counterbalance that before we keep going?
Yeah, the benefits are just that, like you are more sensitive. And so you are more empathic, and you pick up on stuff that other people don't notice at all. You're the one who will notice the kid crying in the corner. You will notice the other person who just kind of lowers their eyes, and everybody else doesn't notice, but you as a sensitive person, you know what that lowering of their eyes meant in that moment. And you can go over it to them because you can feel that more. So the sensitive people have a tremendous gift. And I see sensitive people as being like more open, and that's why it's like more signals are coming in. The signals are stronger than for other people, which means that the signals for everything are stronger. The more sensitive people are also generally the more spiritual people. Like there's a lot of benefits to being open and receptive, and we just need to also learn how to support and manage it so it doesn't become overwhelming.
Yes, beautiful. So we've got our highly sensitive kids are the best potential social workers, counselors, pastors, teachers, nurses, all those helping professions, right? Parents, etc. So let's like tuck that into our hearts, parents, and we're okay. We can, highly sensitive parents, potentially, we can step forward about this. And so the biology, the bodies of highly sensitive kids are different. And how do we want to look at that as something to fix, something to work with, something to work around? Like, how should parents approach this new knowledge?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I think that the traditional way of approaching anything would be like, let's fix it.
Right.
And I think especially with sensitive systems, and I kind of refer to the body as a system, with sensitive systems, we want to come alongside it and support it, and almost it's like building support around a tree or some bush that is struggling with all of the rain or whatever other elements that it's being exposed to. And by coming around and just supporting it, it's able to grow, and it's able to grow well and healthy and tall and strong. So I see it more as aligning ourselves by coming alongside and learning how to support, so that we don't take away the benefits of the sensitivity. We don't ever see them or have them see themselves as they are wrong, they're different, there's something bad about them at all, that anything about them needs to be fixed because they are broken. That is not how we want to see them or have them see themselves. What we want to see is these vulnerabilities. Sensitivity is a vulnerability, and we want to support that vulnerability so that it is not a vulnerability, so that it actually becomes your strength and not your weakness.
I love that philosophically. And just for one practical example, I've got at least 2 kids who are highly sensitive. I am myself. And, if one of my kids is crying about something, I'll say, you know what? It's okay to cry. Sometimes I'll say, we do want to choose what we cry about. Maybe ending screen time, not the most important thing in the world, but I'll say, it's okay. Like, I know you feel this deeply. I know you're crying and it hurts. And just, I want you to know that someday this is going to help you love people better. Or like right now, right? This will help you love people better. You don't have to think that it's bad to cry. So that's like my just quick personal practical example. what do you want to tell parents about taking that sort of philosophy of walk alongside them down into the practical? What does it look like in the trenches?
For the practical, where my mind goes first is, how do I buffer the sensitivity so that they are not as sensitive because of biology reasons? And
Okay.
when I think of someone who hasn't eaten in a while, their blood sugar is low, they didn't sleep well, they, whatever reason it is, all of those things are actually going to increase one's sensitivity for that day. And so those are some very practical things that I like to look at to kind of almost like prevent as much as possible the emotional reactions to change. Any change is hard for a sensitive person, and making sure that, again, like the biology is supported so that it's just that we're working with, and we're not also working with ending screen time and this and this and this, because then you definitely have a much bigger through, but then the aftermath, right? Because does need to be repair of what happened or what was said in order to repair that relationship. And so the less damage that we can have them do by supporting their biology, the easier and the more connected they will be with us as they see us stepping in to help them with their sensitivity and their reactions.
Yeah, I feel like what you're saying, some people would describe as reducing the load, make sure their physical bodies, that you always call biology, is taken care of. They're fed, they're well slept, they've slept well, they're hydrated, they don't have a splinter in their foot or any metaphorical splinters of other kinds, right? Because that's just going to kind of pull them down. And then at the same time, that emotional connection and that a sort of parent-child attachment you're talking about, incredibly important.
Incredibly important. And for sensitive kids, I do see a sense of anytime that they feel disconnected from their parent, then they do seem to have a greater reaction when it comes time for that change.
Okay.
And so actually for sensitive children, screen time can be harder because they are more sensitive, right? Like they do feel and get into that screen time more than other kids. And so it feels harsher for their system to interrupt that connection that they've had with the screen and whatever is going on the screen, and to reconnect with their parent is a harder process for them. And so noticing what are those things that really cause those sensitivities in my child, and reduce that or change the way in which we're doing it so that we're maintaining that connection that I have in the relationship with them, so that it's not as harsh of a change when it comes time to end an activity that they usually have a really hard reaction to.
That is totally fascinating. And it already makes me think back to you talking about addiction. When we think about addiction, we're thinking about adults, we're thinking about substances, but likely our highly sensitive kids, because of what you just talked about, that connection with their screens, they're more likely to be the gaming addicts, and maybe addict is too strong of a word, but the kids who are really sucked in to their screens, who really need help. Walking alongside as a parent, we really need to help them figure out, right, how not to be so sucked in. I always say people over screens, and connect to people over screens. And that's like a fast simplification, but it's kind of what we need to guide our kids toward. Yeah.
And even more so our sensitive kids.
Yeah. Very good. So when we think about supporting our kids' biology, their bodies, there's a lot that we can't see. We can see how much they're eating. We can see kind of how much they're sleeping. But I know that you have some lab tests that you might recommend to parents to make sure what we can't see is also balanced and supported. Help us out here.
Yeah. So in my years of working with kids, I have found that there are really some common biochemical imbalances that lead to sensitivity and emotions and moods. And when I think of sensitivity, there are two that are primary. One would be pyroluria, I don't know if many of your parents will have heard of that. Pyroluria is something that is genetic in the sense that it is something that you will always have, and it causes a functional deficiency in zinc and B6, which are two of the essential nutrients to stabilize your nervous system. And so without those stabilizing forces, then your nervous system is more sensitive and it's more reactive. And in fact, these are the people who tend to burn easier when they're out in the sun. They do tend to have the light sensitivities, the noise sensitivities, they have the chemical sensitivities. So those with pyroluria are generally more sensitive, not only to the physical things, but also show that with their emotions. And this is something that will get worse in times of stress. So if it weren't tough already, then you add on any kind of a stress, whether that's a stress with, hey, it's coming to the end of a school year or the beginning of a school year or any change. And that is a natural stress for the body. And those sensitivities will become worse during times of stress. This is actually a very easy test. We test it with urine, not blood, which is helpful. And what is also important about the pyroluria is that because it is something that comes online fairly early in our life, and it starts to establish this sensitivity, it starts to affect the immune system very early. Our nervous system really drives our immune system. We know that from so many studies around even the immune system in kids based on their parents and their parents' stress level or their parents' depression level. And so just having that effect on their nervous system, we can already see that effect on their immune system. And this pyroluria is actually associated with autoimmunity later on in life. Autoimmunity is one of those things that it doesn't just appear overnight. It actually was in the works, usually for a couple of decades before it shows up. And pyroluria is associated with that. And so again, we're seeing that this sensitivity overall actually does also cause changes in other areas of our biology and will show up later in life.
Is pyroluria something you treat? You mentioned it's genetic. Is that treatable, or do you treat things like the zinc deficiency and the B6 deficiency?
Yeah, you just really need to treat the zinc and B6 deficiency and the increased oxidative stress that the pyroluria causes. And so pyroluria is one of those things, along with copper excess that I'll talk about in a minute, that really causes an increased level of oxidative stress, not only outside of our cells, but inside of our cells. And that is what really starts to trigger epigenetic conditions later on, will change the expression of our genes, and will cause symptoms to appear later on in life. So we really want to protect our cells and be helping it keep that oxidative stress level low. So not only are we going to take zinc and B6 for the pyroluria, but we're also going to take things to support clearing out that oxidative stress so that we're keeping our cells in a healthy state. It's almost like making sure that the bathwater is cleaned out and not having our cells be bathed in this sea of oxidative stress, but being able to, again, kind of come alongside it and support our biology, knowing that this is something that is with us for life, but there's so much that we can do to support it. Of all the biochemical imbalances, pyroluria is the one that responds the fastest to this nutrient support. People often experience changes within 2 or 3 days of being on the nutrients if they have pyroluria.
That's great news. I feel like I have a little open loop in my brain though, because I think you said take things to support and get rid of the oxidative stress in your cells, but I don't think you told us what the things are.
Yeah, so for the oxidative stress, those are going to be things like your vitamin A, vitamin E, vitamin C. Sometimes I will bring in the vitamin D if we're also needing to support the immune system, but other antioxidants are going to be very important to help clear oxidative stress.
Got it. So eat the blueberries, but go a little farther than just that.
You will need a little further than just the blueberries, but eat the blueberries, organic, wild berries especially, very good for clearing oxidative stress.
Okay, I'm totally fascinated. I feel like we just went from like talking about interesting things and we're like deep. like literally and metaphorically, we went deep to the cells, but also like, whew, this is good stuff. I think you said there were two biochemical imbalances. What's the second one?
Yeah, the other one that I see the most in people who are sensitive would be the copper excess. And copper excess can happen as a result of either free high copper in the blood. So copper normally travels in our blood bound to a protein. But if we have too much copper or we don't have enough of that protein, then we have a higher amount of free copper in the blood. Or there's a copper to zinc ratio, and we want that ratio less than 1.25. And so that would be the other way to have a copper excess, is if your copper to zinc ratio is greater than 1.25. And what copper does is it makes the whole system way more reactive. So these are people that would be said to have anger management problems. They tend to be, I would say, moody is another word that they get labeled with, where they can be very reactive, very emotional to things. And it feels like to other people, like it's just immediately, like there was no on ramp. It was an immediate switch to big, big emotions. So these are ones that also experience what you would call like a lot of irritability. And with this copper excess, it takes longer to correct, but we actually do correct it with zinc and B6. So zinc will help lower the copper levels, not only increase the zinc levels, but bring down those copper levels as well. And so by bringing in the copper, the zinc, and the oxidative stress support as well, you're going to be supporting the biology and helping the nervous system not be exposed to this excess copper that literally is like irritating the ends of nerve fibers, making it kind of like explosive and very reactive.
I can only imagine that there are parents out there whose brains have been doing what mine has been doing as you talk and go, oh, yeah, this person in my family. Absolutely, totally. In fact, I'd have hair mineral test analysis for one of my kids who has incredibly high copper. Would you recommend testing hair, blood? How do you do the copper test?
I do the copper test with blood because we also need to test that protein that copper is bound to. So it's not just the copper level by itself. I need the copper, the zinc, and that protein that copper is bound to, which is called ceruloplasmin. And so what I like to do is send people to DHA Labs. DHA Labs has what's called a metabolic panel plus that has all of these labs. So the pyroluria, the copper excess with all of these different elements that are needed to calculate that copper excess. And then the other biochemical imbalance, which is methylation imbalance, which parents should know about the methylation imbalances as well. I wouldn't say that it's much. The overmethylators can be sensitive as well. They are usually like your really artistic types of kids. They're the ones who really don't care about school as much. Like they just want to be in their artistic zone. Whereas if you have an undermethylation status or imbalance, then those are the kids that are very competitive, very driven. They won't play a game if they can't win the game. And so that would be the other thing that is tested, included in this test for the metabolic panel plus, that can all be done at the same time through a lab.
Wow, again, fascinating. I just can't stop using that word. I should get a thesaurus. Should parents be doing these labs just willy-nilly?
Yes.
Like,
Oh
who
my
do we
goodness,
need to work
yes.
with?
So part of my experience, Katie, was realizing that I had all three of these. So I had pyroluria, I am an undermethylator, and I had copper excess. Like my nervous system was a wreck. Looking back, no wonder my body broke. Like just how hard it was to get through every day. And I had no idea, because this had just always been my life. I didn't know any different. I didn't know that other people found school easier. And yet here I was, like I had gone through medical school and done very well in medical school, very well in medical school. And yet I had these biochemical imbalances that had actually made school harder for me, made reading harder for me, reading retention harder for me. And yet, because of some of this other stuff, I also had the drive to do whatever it took to do whatever it took.
Hmm.
And so, like to be able to identify these in yourself is such a blessing because it changes your stability. It changes your ability to not be stressed out and to not experience life and kids and home or work as hard as it has been for you. It's totally a game changer.
Wow. So parents, we need to think about this for ourselves, whether that's for yourself or for your kids, right? If you won't ever do anything for yourself, fix yourself to fix your kids, to serve your kids. We need to think about it for our kids. I'm super curious, Aimie, do you look back at your own childhood and adolescence and see like clear markers of like, were you emotionally sensitive? Did you have texture or sound or light sensitivities where like now, if you were looking at yourself, you would go, oh my goodness, we have to test A, B, and C?
Totally. And I now look back and I feel a lot of sadness for that Aimie because no one else knew.
Right.
And no one knew how hard it was for me to get through a day at school. I was homeschooled for half of my school age years and then in school for the others. And I still remember the light sensitivity that I had from the lights in the class.
Yeah.
And now that I recognize it, I can say something and you know, when I have to go in and take a test or whatever, I can ask to be moved to a different place that there's different location of the light so that they're not shining in my eyes the whole time because it was such a struggle. And I have so much compassion for that Aimie that went through that.
And we don't have to, I feel sad for you, but parents, we don't have to feel the sadness because there is so much hope because there are these tests, there are nutrients, there are vitamins. Aimie, now that you know you have the pylorua, the undermethylation, right? And I'm assuming that you've taken all these nutrients. Is your light sensitivity diminished? Is it not as big a deal
Yes,
anymore?
yes, and I still support my biology.
Uh-huh.
So I guard my energy quite a bit because of all that I do. I don't allow things to drain my energy if I don't need it to. I'm going to save my energy for those things that deserve to drain my energy. And so I will be very quick to put on my sunglasses even inside my house when it's a really bright day or when I'm working on my computer for a long time and I just want to support my biology because again, for by now it's an intentional choice for me of noticing. And I know that we wanted to talk about somatic experiencing and we'll need to do that at a different time, but like that somatic experiencing allows me to notice in the moment the reactions that my body is having to something and I can do something about it in the moment. I don't have to wait like I did before and wait until my body is depleted and exhausted to then be like, oh, there's something wrong. I should do something about it. I can notice things very quickly when subtle things are starting to shift and I can come in and I can support it at that time so that I never get to that place where I'm almost running on empty like I would before.
Yeah, I don't like that feeling either. And so for us as parents, our homework assignment, it's a both and. It's how do we support our kids from the inside, from the base level with like figuring out what the root causes are, what's going on, mitigate their biology, but also in the moment. If they don't like bright lights and they don't like big sounds and they don't like the scratchy and they don't like the squishy texture, right? Or they're emotionally sensitive, how can then we also mitigate those in the moment? This has been so good. Two last things. One, if we get this test and our kid has the ABC or the XYZ, with whom do we work? Like, can we just like go buy some zinc, or should we be working with a specific type of practitioner to dial in what our kid needs?
Yeah, you really want to do it right. You want to get the right dosage based on your lab results, based on to what degree do you have one of the biochemical imbalances. So there are some subtleties to that, and you do want to see a practitioner. I'm more than happy to have them come and see one of my biology and trauma health coaches, and I still review all of those cases as well with them. So that could be a resource for them. They might be able to find another functional medicine practitioner who has been trained in those labs specifically, but that would be what I would ask them before you make an appointment with them, is making sure that they have had that specific training in these biochemical imbalances.
Perfect. So it doesn't have to be an MD. And in fact, likely it won't be an MD because they won't have that training. Could be a functional medicine doc, could be a properly trained health coach, nutritional therapy practitioner. Would they be on the list if they're familiar with this stuff too?
Dr. Walsh is the one who has done most of the training with these biochemical imbalances, and he's been pretty careful to only train physicians and doctors. So it might be harder to find someone who is not a physician or a doctor of some sorts and has had that training directly. I've got my health coaches that I've trained them in this and then still oversee them. So that's why if they come in and see me at Trauma Healing Accelerated, that they'll be able to see a health coach at those prices and also get the benefit of getting the biochemical imbalances addressed. So again, just make sure that whoever you are seeing has specific experience and training with these biochemical imbalances. You don't want to mess this up.
Perfect.
Right?
Yes.
We're dealing with sensitive people here. You don't want to.
Yeah, exactly. You over zinc them, and it's probably terrible because you're the MD,
Yes,
you're the
it
physician, and you
actually
figured
is.
out how to multiply
Mhm.
yourself in all
Right.
these health coaches, which is awesome.
And that is the danger with the copper excess, Katie, is that if you do the zinc too much too fast, it will actually worsen the sensitivity and the reactivity of the copper excess. So you do want to work with a practitioner.
Very good. We will link to your biology of trauma trained practitioner list. We're also going to link to the 21-day journey to calm aliveness, because this is something that many parents may need. Tell us a little bit about that, my dear.
So I've been doing studies now with people going through this 21-day journey, and I've been asking them what are the specific changes that they experience. Above all else, Katie, there is one thing that is coming back. They are experiencing a 60% increase in their felt sense of safety.
Okay.
And the people coming into the 21-day journey are usually people like you and me who didn't even know that they didn't feel safe in their body. Like they didn't even know that they didn't feel safe in their body until they started this work of somatic experiencing. That's the bulk of the 21-day journey. And so to experience such a shift in just over 21 days, where they experience a 60% increase in their felt sense of safety, their felt sense of safety in themselves, with themselves, in the world, it's changing a lot of things in their life. It's changing their sleep. It's changing their food sensitivities. It's changing their digestive system. It's changing their anxiety level. It's changing a lot of things as the ripple effect of just actually, for the first time, maybe ever, maybe in a really long time, truly feeling safe in their body.
Wow. And to pull this back in two ways. First, this is for adults, not kids, the 21-day journey. But I know you say that one of the benefits is that it can improve the parent-child relationship, right? If we're feeling safer, if our anxiety is reduced, we're not as reactive. We can be responsive to our kids and attach so much better. So that's amazing. Do it for your kids if you won't do it for yourself. And then lastly, are highly sensitive people more likely to feel unsafe? Highly sensitive kids or adults?
Yes, that is the key feature of a highly sensitive child. They, just because of their sensitivities, Katie, it may have nothing to do with the relationship that they had with their parents. Their parents can be the best parents in the world, that perfect, who did absolutely everything right, everything. Haven't met that parent yet, but even if it happened, they could be the perfect parent, but because of the sensitivities that the child has, they experience life, world as overwhelming. And those experiences have been wired into their system, into their early life experiences. So then that's now their lens for the world, that they have to guard themselves. They have to protect themselves because everything is so overwhelming because of their sensitivities. So yes, highly sensitive people may have never truly felt safe in their life because the sensitivities started so early in life.
Which makes these kids harder to parent, but so worthwhile, which is
It changes everything.
that's my sentiment to leave with you. From you, Dr. Aimie, I like to end with the most like one step, because this was a lot. It was a good lot, but it was a lot. What would you tell parents, like, as they walk away from whatever device they're using to listen to this interview? one practical thing they should do with the information?
If they have a highly sensitive child, then I would go order the labs for themselves and their child. If
Done
their
deal.
child sees that they are also doing labs, then the child is more likely to be able to be willing to go through that process. But if your child is highly sensitive and has some of these biochemical imbalances, good chances are that you have at least one of them too. And so that would be my first step. If you have a highly sensitive child, just go get the testing.
So good. And yeah, unfortunately, the highly sensitive children probably don't like being poked to have their blood
Exactly. They
drawn.
feel it more. They
So
feel it
buy
more,
them a
yeah.
hamster. That's my lived experience that really works. After a year of trying to get blood from one of my kids, offering a hamster, done deal. She was looking at pictures of a hamster on my phone while she was getting poked. So, you know, whatever the metaphorical hamster is for your child, you may need to do it to get these labs. But at the end of that process is a lot of hope and a lot of change. Thank you, Dr. Aimie Apigian. I think you are very much going to be one of the select elite who are invited twice on this show, because we have so much more I want to talk to you about with trauma and somatic experiencing. Thank you so much for dialing in highly sensitive kids for us, though.
Thank you, Katie.
This has been amazing. All the links that we talked about, the labs, the practitioner group that Dr. Aimie has, all those health coaches, everything we talked about are always in the show notes. So go there. I'm Katie Kimball for the Healthy Parenting Connector, and I will see you next week with another expert who has the information you need to help you raise healthy, independent adults. And you know what? Keep your sanity as well. See you next time.